The Canby Report was produced and recorded on the traditional territories of the Coquitlam, Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples.
It's February 19th, 2026, and there are 240 days left until the Vancouver municipal elections. This is the Canby Report. I'm Matthew Naylor.
And I'm Ian Bushfield.
Welcome back, everyone. It is an election year, and we are kicking into high gear. It is a pleasure to be back with you for this eventful episode of the Canby Report. We have so much news, so many things are happening, and in order to continue bringing you this type of news, we would like to ask for your contributions at patreon.com/Canby Report.
Yes, you have until Friday to give us your money, or else we will be launching, I don't know what our ultimatum is, but it seems like it's the week of ultimatums. So patreon.com/Canby Report.
Yes, patreon.com/Canby Report, your source for citizen journalism in Vancouver and its environs.
So as mentioned, this has been the week of ultimatums. A couple weeks ago now, we kind of teased it on the end of our last episode. Pete Fry announced his mayoral bid with the Vancouver Greens. Following that, OneCity and Cope both put out a good for you statement as they all were in the midst of negotiations about who should be the progressive mayoral candidate. And Cope and Green were in particularly pitching around this idea of a progressive primary. And we'll come back to that in a minute. OneCity was in the midst of its mayoral nomination election, and they voted in the interim and picked William Azaroff.
Mr. Azaroff defeated Amanda Burrows by a vote of 1,324 to 929. He ran on a platform that was, quote, pro-growth, pro-housing, pro-worker, practical progressivism. Just a parcel of peas there for all the progressives at the OneCity nomination meeting. As to whether or not this is actually going to be good for progressives remains to be seen, but he has a number of marquee policies that he's been running on, including zoning for childcare by right, the use of the Vancouver Public Housing Corporation to deliver 4,000 rental homes on city land, modernizing traffic lights, and rebuilding the Britannia Community Center.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive that Azaroff won this. I wasn't sure which way it would go. I kind of thought Burrows might have a little bit more momentum behind her, but I was wrong. Kind of a few hundred votes apart in a respectable turnout for OneCity. Getting 2,200 people to vote is not bad, but it's also not
It's not bad, but it's not something that like is overwhelming, and like, you know, and we'll get into the ultimatum in a second, but it's certainly not the kind of overwhelming show of force that I would have expected if they had been like for a party that was attempting to kind of strong arm their proposal for what they see it as a kind of progressive left cooperative slate between themselves, the Greens, and Cope.
Yeah, I was trying to look back through history to figure out where some other parties had been, and I found an article from like 2008 that said Vision Vancouver at the time had 13,000 members, which is unfathomable to me. That's like how many the BC NDP have today.
Yeah, and admittedly, there are some BC NDP. There's a fairly substantial amount of overlap. There were a number of endorsements that William Azaroff has picked up, including Mike Harcourt, former premier, Jennifer Reddy, George Heyman, who is both a former councillor and in addition to NDP MLA. You know, there is some momentum. Obviously, it's a decent turnout, but basically what OneCity has done has proposed what they are calling the progressive primary proposal.
This is a great episode to podcast for the plosives.
Yeah. So hopefully our pop filter is working perfectly. So the progressive primary proposal was issued 2 days ago on February 17th, and OneCity has requested a response by Friday, which is asking a lot of the other parties to respond so quickly. I think they're really trying to box the other parties into a corner here, and I don't know that they have the strength to do so.
Yeah, I've worked in a lot of nonprofits, and they're often not very quick or nimble, especially with volunteer boards of directors, and local political parties are effectively a kind of nonprofit. Nevertheless, Coping the Greens did manage to get back to OneCity pretty quickly on this, but let's dig into what they proposed. And specifically, this was framed as William Azaroff, mayoral candidate, directing the OneCity negotiation team to propose this to the others, which raises an interesting, like, kind of dumb technical aspect that I was thinking about. Like, I think the OneCity board is still in control, but because mayoral candidates don't carry the same power as, like, the leader of
party leader, yeah.
Yeah, a federal or even a provincial party. But at the same time, you need to have unity between your mayoral candidate and your organization. It's kind of trivial.
I wonder if this is like a holdover or like some kind of cultural drift from how we run federal and provincial parties, like where we have these elected party bosses that are elected by the membership that are effectively dictators at any point in between leadership reviews. And while that's not directly analogous to how OneCity or the other municipal parties elect their mayor, there is a substantial amount of control that the mayoral candidate rather can exert over the party and how they run their campaign, especially given how the top of the ticket does really have a strong impact on how people vote in the rest of the race.
Yeah, and I get a sense some of the communication things here are being guided by Azaroff's team kind of coming in, his campaign team coming in to become a mayoral and like the OneCity campaign team. Not to say these were like a hostile takeover or anything, but it's just like a couple new people who have a slightly different way of doing things than people 2 weeks ago might have been doing things. In any case, the proposal he has brought forward, it's notable because this is like the first public acknowledgement of the unity talks besides just updates that they are ongoing. This is negotiating in public. Notably, this was a surprise to everybody else.
It's a system as good as like strata councils, I'm sure.
Or student politics, I've seen it described.
Yeah.
They say the progressive primary should be a primary vote. Each party's members get one vote in a race, an election that will happen within 45 days. Those membership lists will be set in stone as of February 17th when they launched this.
They issued the membership, which is trying to stack the deck very much in Azaroff's favor here. They're suggesting that this campaign be concluded within 45 days and that it'd be run by some kind of third-party chief electoral officer. The thing that I think is notable is that I don't actually know what the Greens timeline for signing up memberships for people who are running for council is, or for COPEs for that matter. But OneCity had to have their memberships locked for this previously, and I think that basic element of fairness would be, if you want, you can have a week or two to sign up additional members if that's something that you agree to in terms of this progressive primary proposal. That was not OneCity's offer.
OneCity even put a membership sign-up fundraising email out the same day as well.
Well, you got to get those memberships in under the wire.
The final bits, have independent verification of the membership list, jointly agree the electoral officer, and split the cost 3 ways. I don't think anyone opposed those or thought that was unreasonable. I did see some questions, particularly from the COPE camp, of whether this approach could conform to the Local Election Financing Act. That is, we're talking about a system that involves distinct electoral organizations pooling funds for a common cause, and that goes against some of the spirit of the law. And I don't think we've gotten a solid answer of whether it is legal or not. Opinions are reasonably differing, but I imagine that's some of the hesitation we've seen, or at least that's what I've seen some people talk about.
Well, and like that opens a whole can of worms as to like the potential misuse and like malspending of other organizations, whether that's for or against a particular candidate, whether that's a candidate saying, I'm endorsed by this party, and then having this other organization either trying to spend out their their support of like a single candidate, or to exist as a separate candidate that is spending third party money, or even like nomination money, like for the candidate as a way to kind of circumvent the limits. It's something that, is confusing, and indeed we're not the only ones who are confused. Cope has said that they are, quote, confused by the unexpected proposal, a previous offer on February 12th.
Yeah, I was actually pretty impressed that both the Cope and Greens were able to get responses out quite quickly. Pete Fry also has a video up where he expresses a similar, like, we were at the table. What is all of this? Where did all this come from? This isn't how we wanted to do this. Cope posted what their last offer was, that as of February 12th, which they say the Greens had agreed to, and the Greens even acknowledge, Cope had a thing that we were pretty open to. Their idea was to not just talk about the mayor, but also all of the other positions. Most people want to see is smaller ballots this year, where we don't have 24 candidates running between the broadly progressive parties. Cope's suggestion was each party would limit themselves to a maximum of 5 candidates for council and mayor. So if you run a mayor, 4 for council, 4 for schools, and 4 for parks. This would still produce potentially more candidates than you could vote for, but 15, 14 for council is a little bit better than 20.
It is a little better than 20. The thing that I don't really understand about Cope's proposal is their statement where they would include a progressive primary where each party, and this is their quote, agree to make individual determinations. Doesn't actually sound like a unified progressive primary at all, but rather just parties agreeing to do their own thing.
Like, the full quote is, they agree to make individual determinations on whether to stay in the race or not in the context of public scrutiny against vote splitting and a public agreement to a progressive primary. The idea is kind of just go on vibes of whether you feel like you're doing well enough or not. And sometimes that can work. We saw Ian Campbell drop out being Vision's mayoral candidate in 2018. There was a lot going on then as well. But I struggle to see a situation where Pete Fry and or William Azaroff, either of them, decide to drop out. And if Cope gets someone prominent, that person might have... Like, the problem we've faced up until this point is each of these parties has some argument of why they are electorally viable. They also have arguments of why they're not.
And I think the tragedy of this is that, like, from just first glance, the OneCity proposal looks like an attempt to strong-arm the other parties into doing what they want rather than making a kind of good faith effort for cooperation. And it's so close to being a good faith effort for cooperation because, like, had there been, just a SOP to a open contest where you could have 1 or 2 weeks to sign up additional members, then that could very reasonably have been a way to say, we're willing to let our nominee stand on their merits. They'll run for mayor if they get the most votes between our 3 parties. If they don't, then we won't run them. However, the way that they're doing it, I just don't think that they have the muscle to strong arm them as they appear to be trying to do.
The other thing I've seen criticized about the Cope proposal is with the limits on council is they are proposing that no party seek a full majority, right? And therefore we're doomed to go back to the Kennedy-Stewart Rainbow Coalition as a best case scenario. And the kind of counterpoint to that is just like, none of these parties are strong enough to win a majority or have proven they are strong or competent enough to win a majority. And so if you're trying to get 3 groups to agree to work together, you either have to agree to not run for a majority or you just don't go to unity talks because there is no unity and we end up in 2022 again.
For OneCity's other positions are also coming forward on council and school board and the parks board, as well as candidates for Vancouver Liberals. The Vancouver Liberals are a party headed by Karima Lam. They currently have no seats on city council, but they now have a number of people who are signing up to be candidates who are already elected. And that person most recently is Brennan Bastiavansky, who ran previously with ABC, and he has indicated that he will be joining the Liberals.
Yeah, so the ex-ABC organizer, who now has a lot of bad blood with the current mayor, has picked up 3 former ABC candidates, 2 on park and 1 on school board, and we'll see how many run for council versus just re-election on the current board. But it is interesting, right, to see the momentum he has and the ability relatively easily to just rise above all the other debates by just saying, hey, we're focused on building a good team and taking on this election.
Yeah, and Bastiavansky hasn't indicated whether he's going to be running for council or park board yet. And so, I think that he's been a particularly competent parks board commissioner. And so I would be interested in seeing him move up to council. But the quality of candidate recruitment appears to be fairly strong in terms of the Vancouver Liberals. I think that they are definitely positioning themselves as a less incompetent version of ABC.
And that could be the winning formula.
I think it might be.
The other attempt to replace ABC, of course, is Rebecca Bly's Vote Vancouver, which, I think we both like Rebecca Bly and have, respected her work, but it's really hard for me to keep following Vote Vancouver because I keep forgetting they exist, honestly. I remembered because someone posted that, on Instagram, they are seeking candidates and they have launched their candidate recruitment process. So I'll shout that out now. Mm-hmm. But I am unclear what she is hoping to accomplish that she couldn't do with Kareem.
Yeah, and I'm not sure either. I also am not entirely clear what she stands for other than, her platform on this is sparse. There, 3 main headings: service, vision, and trust. A lot of them are just status quo things like, we believe that the integrity commissioner's office is good and don't want to get rid of it, and we believe that the park board should be kept in place. We believe that meaningful public consultation should exist, as opposed to all the other candidates who hate public consultation and don't believe in public consultation.
As we'll get to later, I don't believe in public consultation anymore.
Fair enough. But for those of you who are interested with running with Rebecca Bly, you can go to votevancouver.ca/run-with-us.
Alternatively, if you hate everything about the city but really love public consultation, Team is also seeking candidates for mayor, council, and school board and park board with their nomination plans for March and June meetings. So they still exist.
Yes. Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And Ken Sim officially announced that he is running for re-election as we kind of cycle through all the parties who are existing. I did look. NPA Vancouver's website has been bought up by someone else. Their domain registration expired and it's gone, and Vision Vancouver's Nation Builder page is closed.
In the press release that Ken Sim and NBC Vancouver put out announcing his re-election bid, there is a choice quote: "I haven't gotten everything right, but leadership isn't about getting everything right from day one. It's about learning, adjusting, and delivering." So there is at least some kind of acknowledgement that Ken Sim's first term has been, let's say, fraught to a degree. Challenges.
Speaking of fraught with challenges, Surrey.
Oh, yes.
Have a new mayoral candidate there. Not really a surprise. It's been talked about for probably the last year, but former NDP MLA and Surrey First Councillor Mike Starchuk has launched Imagine Surrey as his vessel of choice and has started seeking candidates to run alongside him.
He was a Surrey First Councillor from 2014 to 2018 and was an NDP MLA from 2020 to 2024. There are 2 other candidates who are currently in the race, the current incumbent Mayor Brenda Locke, as well as Councillor Linda Annis. Starchuk was pretty forthright in his description of why he's running, saying, quote, "I'm pretty sure I can do better. I want to go back to the way it was in 2014 when we weren't the laughing stock for certain things."
He gets very specific. We need to stop saying things like, we're going to build a canal through the middle of the city, or we're going to get rid of a group of employees and fight with that group of employees the whole time, referring to the police transition. Starchuk has also announced the first 4 candidates for Imagine Surrey. They are William Lee, Kevin Wilkie, Narima Dela Cruz, and Yusuf Aldebenai Barakat, who have a variety of roles. None have past electoral experience from what I've seen, but council is a good place to usually start.
Moving back to Vancouver, Lucy Maloney has come up with a motion that basically she's trying to, quote, eliminate double standards on remote work at City Hall. It's titled Walking the Talk, Aligning City Staff and Council's Remote Work Policy. Basically says that Council has the ability to update its own governing rules to eliminate double standards and align the working conditions to current expectations for City of Vancouver staff, i.e., if staff can't work from home, then the council shouldn't be able to either.
Yeah, this is a motion I actually oppose, but I really appreciate the hypocrisy she's trying to point out here. I think, remote participation and remote work is a good thing, but what she's trying to do here is say, hey, we have told staff through the city manager that they have to show up in person for some reason, even though all our staff tell us they like flexibility and hybrid work, as most workers do. And so if they can't attend from home, we as council should not, with some limited exceptions for health or childcare duties. I think this would mostly affect one particular councillor who was living in North Vancouver when he was first elected, and I now believe lives in Kelowna.
Okay.
Brian Montague.
Yeah, that's a... Has Mr. Montague, Councillor Montague, announced whether he's running for re-election yet?
I believe he's not running for re-election.
Well, that seems fair. Meanwhile, down by Falls Creek, the Olympic Village school proposal is gaining to a consultation. Dozens of speakers were on the phone lines and in person to speak at Vancouver City Hall last Thursday about a school that has been in the works for 20 years now.
This is like the biggest indictment on the city of Vancouver ever. Is like, we built a community for the Winter Olympics in 2010 and said, we will give you a school. And then we never gave them the fucking school. They need a school.
No, they need, effectively double the amount of school that was originally planned. The plans have been recently revised to double the number of students from 300 to 600 and increasing the number of stories from 3 to 4. There is space for this. It's Hinge Park. It's this area to the west of the kind of heart of Olympic Village. It has been earmarked for this school for ages, and a full generation of students will have started living, grown up, been born, grown up, entered the schooling system, and left the schooling system while waiting for the school, which is ridiculous.
The need to double the size of the school meant that it pushes some of the zoning rules of that site and had to go through another round of public consultation, which is how we got here. It should not, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, it should not be controversial to build a school, even if it's a meter larger than was technically allowed under zoning. It's who fucking cares? Apparently too many people. And it's not just people are showing up to say, oh man, this school is overdue. People are showing up to say, you can't build it that big. And I don't understand, Matthew.
And the need is quite dire. The Olympic Village area has far and away the highest density of children under the age of 14 in any neighborhood in the entire city. At the time of the last census, 800 kids under 14 in the 8 city blocks that comprise Olympic Village. Current elementary school for the area is Simon Fraser Elementary School, which is up by 16th Avenue, which for an elementary school, it's a fair hike.
Mm-hmm. The public hearing went long, so they didn't manage to vote on it last week. So on February 26th, council will reconvene to finally vote on this. And so help us if they vote against this fucking school.
Yeah, I don't understand what has taken so long. Truly, this is an indictment on the school board, on the city council, on the Ministry of Education. This is like a tremendous unmet need, which really needs to be solved quickly.
On the more positive zoning aspect, the Langara Gardens redevelopment was unanimously approved. This will put 2,600 new homes beside Langara Golf Course. This is part of the Canby Corridor. The project will put in a number of new buildings fitting almost 1,500 strata market condos, almost 700 purpose-built rentals, and 180 social housing. It will also reserve 2 parcels for Vancouver to build 258 social housing.
Yes, this is a project that's being run by Concert Properties and the Peterson Group. There are currently townhouse blocks there. There are 4 1970s built existing rental towers of 335 units, which will receive upgrades, while some other units will be replaced. It's so close. We're so close to building on the golf course. We should just build on the golf course. It is unspeakably vast and can fit so many people, but we have elected to not do that. The townhouse complex is the thing that will be primarily redeveloped, while the 4 towers, which are down to the southeast of the site, are the ones that will be retained. And you can see them in the kind of revised concept art that James Chang Architects and Concert and Peterson have put out.
A more controversial rezoning also passed by City of Vancouver for redevelopment around Main and Quebec Street and Science World. This is at 1405 Main. This vote was interesting because it's actually a city development. The Vancouver property development arm wants to build 2 towers here and have decided to try to optimize value and financial returns for the city within the property endowment fund. Pete Fry and Sean Orr actually opposed the city building its own market rental housing in the end.
So these 2 towers, which are respectively 42 and 45 stories, so they're big towers, 425 feet in height, will hold about 780 purpose-built market rental units, and have a bunch of restaurant and retail space on the ground level, which admittedly I think is a positive for that area. This is basically Maine and Quebec, and I think that our waterfront, the seawall, is a little bit from a lack of things to do rather than just sit in the park or walk. And so I'm always interested in seeing proposals that present more shopping and retail around that area. But this proposal by the Vancouver Housing Development Office is one that I think is welcome.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good project overall. The idea is to generate about $700 million in revenue for the city over the life of the project, about 35 to 40 years. And it will require about $700 million in financing, though, and they're optimistic they can find some private development partners to make this all work. The reason Fry and Orr opposed it is both presented amendments to require some below market or social housing inclusion, respectively. Both suggested 20%. Their argument being, look, this is city-owned land. If private developers develop something, their goal is to maximize profit. Our goal as the city should not be simply profit, but to have a broader bottom line that also includes making this city affordable. We can't say we're going to take the money from every project to eventually make the city affordable if we're not actually spending some of it to make the city affordable. And I think that's a reasonable debate to hold. I don't think it was one ABC was likely to accept. Mm-hmm. And so I think at least staking that position was worthwhile for them. One of the responses I've also heard is this project's going to take a long time to get built, and there's an election this year, and maybe the terms of the project get changed next year.
Yes, and just for everyone's reference, this is the site of the McDonald's.
Yes.
Speaking of developments and potential boondoggles, a large amount of money seems to have, well, we don't know what's happened to it. Vancouver House, the large kind of twisty building at the northern foot of the Granville Street Bridge, was required to put in $10 million in community amenity contributions to the city in exchange for the permissions that it required in order to build the project. $4 million of that was in cash, but the remaining $6 million was supposed to be in-kind public realm improvements. What has happened to that $6 million? Has anyone tracked them? No.
The Auditor General has this pair of reports, and we'll start with this one, that are just damning. They basically went through this and found that the city did not document, monitor, or enforce how these in-kind CACs were delivered. So we just don't know if that neighborhood got better because of this project to the amount that it was supposed to. Not great.
Very specifically, the $6 million that was looked at by the Auditor General, the Auditor General has said that they have found no evidence of any of the improvements happening. That includes things like special lighting, kiosks, public seating, infrastructure to facilitate events, or accessibility to public washrooms. Those are pretty basic things, and you can generally point to them and see if there's a washroom there or not. That effectively there has been no enforceable, and this is a direct quote, no enforceable specific or itemized list of what was to be delivered, broken down by the value of each component. Finally, and this is, I'm sure, something that some people will think of, that spinning chandelier was not part of it.
The CAC system was always not great. It was like this idea that we could sell redevelopment and permission to upzone through backroom deals, and that will maximize what the city gets with what developers are willing to pay. That already seems kind of shady and unaccountable. And then once you add in that the city's not even trying to account for it, it just seems like a scam. It just seems like a grift. Like, you can say development shouldn't pay for development, or growth shouldn't pay for growth, that's fine, but we did live under a system where we expected growth to pay for some development and growth, but apparently it wasn't. So the city just lost out on material improvements to that area.
What is the recourse to this? Does Vancouver have to sue West Bank? Is that something that this council would be interested in doing? Is that something that is even possible? Are we just now discovering this loss, and then is the clock start ticking on our ability to try and recover that money? I think that's a hard case to make, given that the city effectively put no safeguards in place to ensure that West Bank was actually going to be delivering on their promises.
It gets worse, Matthew, because in a separate report, the Auditor General also looked at how well the city has done at selling its land over the last 8 years. It's not great. So the auditor looked at 16 of the 40 land sales the city has made over the period 2016 to 2024. 14 of those were initiated by property developers who wanted to buy city-owned land, and it seemed the city didn't really have a standardized approach to what happens when someone comes and says, hey, can we buy this property? So there's just this ad hoc approach, and that could be fine if you're a smaller city, but you would think that a city the size of Vancouver could have a process for this. And basically every line of this is bad. City Council was not generally informed of key information, including things like the fact that the agreed sale prices were below appraised values in at least 6 transactions.
That's wild.
Right.
The whole point of a representative democracy is that our representatives have the information that they need. This is the kind of thing that's impossible to put up for referendum. We shouldn't be doing this kind of thing by direct democracy or direct engagement. However, implicit within this system that we've chosen requires specific people, i.e. our city councilors or elected officials, to have enough information to make informed decisions on this. And I don't know whether that's failing on city staff or the city council at the time, but it is a stunning indictment of the failures of the city to effectively manage its assets and the disposition of those assets to developers.
There are very specific failures that the Auditor General cites that among city staff, notably in 2 transactions that each were worth over $90 million and took multiple years in delay. The city did not collect interest. That sounds
it's
bad,
insane.
But it's $26 million insane, Matthew.
Yeah, that's money. That's just an incredible amount of money. And that's not all. There's a $13 million error that occurred when selling 601 Beach Crescent, and that resulted in the city agreeing to pay developers about $12 million in community amenity contributions.
Yeah, the city paid the contribution instead of the developer in one sale.
Truly, why has this been allowed to happen? In about half a dozen of these transactions, council gave approval without being made aware that sale price was below the appraised value. This is like an unconscionable dereliction of duty, or some like very explicit corruption on the part of individuals within the development permitting of Vancouver. I don't know what's happening, but whatever is happening is unacceptable.
I think it was Colleen Hardwick who pitched the Auditor General's office for the city of Vancouver, and I think we were like, okay, sure. I didn't expect this. This makes that office worth it.
Yeah.
Take your victory lap, Colleen. They are.
Let no one say that we don't give credit when credit is due. And while it pains me deeply to credit Colleen Hardwick with anything, she did get this one right.
One thing that did not go right is the Stanley Park train. The thing that Ken Sim had tried to save is dead, never to come back, as the park board is seeking a new attraction for Stanley Park. Maybe a train, maybe a petting zoo, maybe something entirely new.
So while this train has been a fixture in the park since 1964, and it's generally been open during the summer and for Easter, Halloween, and Christmas, the pandemic, the challenges of the train began to compound, and in 2025, the train didn't run at all. A safety incident that caused the 2024 Christmas train to stop running suddenly. Basically, there have been ongoing mechanical and infrastructure failures, and there would have been major upgrades required in order to save the train. The like-for-like replacement, one of the things that's being considered, but basically the park board has asked for any number of possible proposals. A children's farmyard, petting zoo type thing used to exist in the park and could again. This whole area spans about 16 acres, most of which is forested.
I'm curious to see what comes forward. It could be something really interesting and unique. It could also be a total scam and grift. I think it depends on who gets reelected. Although the bidding process is due by March 31st of this year, so we'll see how fast the park board can move on this and if they can get something launched next year.
Speaking of scams and grifts, casinos! The Park Casino, which is that giant copper building downtown next to BC Place, has managed to procure an additional 300 slots at their downtown Vancouver location. City Council has approved more gambling in the downtown core because apparently 600 slots was insufficient to handle the amount of money that was being taken out of people's pockets, and they needed more of those one-armed bandits in their building.
I don't think they use the arms on slot machines anymore, but I know what you mean. The history of gambling in Vancouver is fascinating. I read John Horgan's memoir recently where he talks about how one of his first political jobs was working for, I think it was Mike Harcourt, years ago, and he could sense the political winds were changing, and Vancouver had up until then avoided bringing in gambling, but they knew if with Gordon Campbell verge of coming in that they could either bring it in under their terms or it would just come in a free-for-all. So John Horgan took pride in that he brought a managed gambling into Vancouver. But the other way you can look at it is you have John Horgan to blame for gambling in Vancouver.
Well, accountability is difficult to come by, but occasionally we manage to achieve it. RCMP in Coquitlam have meted out some accountability to a number of RCMP officers who, frankly, no longer RCMP officers. The public conduct adjudicator has fired a BC RCMP officer effective immediately, saying that his conduct was too egregious to justify him remaining a member of the force.
This all dates back to investigations that started in 2021, so he has been suspended with pay for 4 years, 4.5 years. before finally getting justice. Constable Philip Dick is one of 3 officers in the Coquitlam detachment who faced code of conduct proceedings over sexist, racist, and harassing comments they had in a group chat over Signal. These were leaked by one individual who was in it. I've seen some of the comments, and it's wild that it took 4 years to fire them.
Not only was he doing this on Signal, but it was also using police mobile data terminals, and these comments were ones that don't bear repeating, but suffice it to say they, and this is a quote, degraded members of the public, vulnerable persons, and colleagues. Really is kind of a trifecta of things that you're not supposed to be doing as a peace officer and member of the force. The 2 other officers, one of them has apparently been fired already, and another one either resigned or was terminated. The specifics of that, I believe, are being kept confidential. This is, frankly, the very least we can expect of the police force. Indeed, I think we should be asking for more. Justice shouldn't take 5 years, 4 years to deliver, and it is just a shame that it took so long for the force to finally do the right thing. I'm all for due process. I think it's important, but as with many things about our justice system in Canada, it does move incredibly slowly to an absolutely ridiculous degree. We end every episode of the Cambie Report with a Vancouverata, a little tidbit from Vancouver's history, and boy do we have a great one for you today. This is the story of Richard Marpole and Bill Miner. So Richard Marpole, as you might be able to guess, is the man for whom the Marpole neighborhood is named. He was a CPR executive who, kind of unusually for CPR executives, actually lived in Vancouver for a little bit. As opposed to planning the entire city from a London boardroom, which is how much of the rest of the city was planned. However, Marpole took an active interest in the city, and not only did he lend his name to the Vancouver neighborhood at the south end of the city, but was involved in a posse that tracked down notorious outlaw Bill Miner.
Who is Bill Miner, Matthew? I don't recognize that name.
Well, Bill Miner, among other things, is most famous for, I'm sure you may have heard this phrase, he originated the phrase hands up, for he was a train robber, a bank robber, a notorious bandit, but, you know, a gentlemanly one at that. He was referred to as the gentlemanly bandit, and has, you know, given that particular bon mot to history. Richard Marpole, after a train robbery near Kamloops, near Monty Creek, which was then known as Ducks, they managed to rob $15 and a bottle of kidney pills after choosing the wrong car to rob, and his accomplices were eventually cornered near Douglas Lake. A posse surrounded them while they were lunching in the woods, and while he presented himself with a false name and said that they were prospectors, the posse was suspicious and took them into custody, thus providing another entry into Richard Marpole's storied life.
The one anecdote I want to share about Marpole comes from an older Vancouver Sun article where they say Marpole was a strong guy, and they recount how in September 1908 he was riding with some CPR officials in a car in Shaughnessy when they had an unpleasant experience. The chauffeur couldn't make it up the hill and reversed to change gear, but the machine started to glide down the hill with a pace rapidly increasing. The chauffeur tried to turn the car into a bank, but it started to tip over. Apparently, Marpole leapt out of the car and, quote, in true Herculean style, threw his weight against the tipping car and succeeded in preventing the impending upset.
So,
he's a Hulk.
Yeah, Richard Marpole, a mountain man, tracked down another mountain man who had robbed $15 and some kidney pills from a payroll train. What a hilarious little tidbit from BC's history, and I'm very glad to share it with you today. That brings us to the end of another episode of the Cambie Report. Stay tuned for more as this election season gets running up and underway. For Leg and Boot Media, I'm Matthew Naylor.
And I'm Ian Bushfield.
Good night.